Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. We got training camp starting up this week, so it'll be daily training camp updates provided by me, of course, on the Commanders. There'll be that. We'll have that for every team, but you can go to the Commanders page and get daily updates, little observations, news of the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think, folks, there's going to be a lot of news coming out of this camp with McLaurin. You have Jaden Daniels and what's going on with him. It just in terms of like second year, Deebo Samuel's here, Von Miller's here. It's going to be an interesting season. So anyways, make sure you go to ESPN.com for that. Also, in a minute, I'll be joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we talk about a couple things. Now, the conversation started with a topic I did not anticipate, and that's based on what the president put out on his social media about perhaps forcing the organization to change the name in order to, otherwise he could block them going down to RFK, because that, of course, was federal land. So anyway, I don't know if this is going to happen. Here's what I know. And I always say this, and said this when I was talking with Bram, but I do get a little sensitive to this, mainly because I don't think people understand what I do. I am a reporter. I will tell you what they're saying or what they say. I have not given my opinion on the name. Anybody who knows me knows what my opinion is. People out there, unless you sat down and talked to me in private, you don't know. So don't guess. Anyways, but that all being said, my job is to report what the team is saying. And what I've told you all along is that Josh Harris has said he's not changing it. Yes, I know what Dan Snyder said years ago, but there was pressure from sponsors that changed that equation, among other things, right? There were issues with the minority partners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think Josh Harris is going to have pressure applied by sponsors to change the name back. That being said, I don't know. I can't look 10 years down the road. I just know what they're telling us right now. And it's been like that for a long time. I'm not trying to throw water on somebody and throw out this fire or whatever, but I'm just telling you what they say. So what could happen, I don't know. What happens with the stadium, I don't know. What I do know, too, is that at one point, Mayor Bowser had said the name would be an obstacle to going back for them to get a deal done in RFK. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll report the news, but it is not my decision to change the name. It never was. I never advocated for anything. I reported what their name was when it was the Redskins, and I called them the football team, and I called them the Commanders because that's their name. So, and I understand my wife grew up in D.C. She grew up a Redskins fan. Trust me when I say I understand. I'm from Cleveland. I am an Indians fan, a Guardians fan. So I understand this topic very, very well. So anyway, that being said, let's move on from that. But that's one of the things that Bram and I talked about. So where it goes, I don't know. I will have a special guest on. I'll be talking to them Monday night who may have a really good idea of what's going on. I do think you're going to want to hear this one. That probably will come out either Monday night or Tuesday. So join me for that. It may end up to be a news story on ESPN as well. So just there's a little heads up on that. So that's one thing. Number two, Terry McLaurin situation. We talk about that. And then we talk about other aspects of the team because there's way more than just what's going on at the stadium with McLaurin and just talking a little bit about like expectations for the season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a minute, I'll play with that. By the way, first of all, before I get to anything else, Huel is back as a sponsor. And you know I'm a fan of their Black Edition for a couple of reasons. 40 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals. You know this, when I'm in a hurry, don't feel like making a big breakfast, you got a lot of stuff going on, grab the Huel, put it in a little bit of ice, less than $3 a bottle, and I'm getting a meal. Favorite, of course, is the strawberry banana, as well as the chocolate. So if you're a new customer, you get 15% off at huel.com. That's huel.com, huel.com, when you use my code Keim. That's 15% off for new customers using my exclusive code, and that's Keim at huel.com. See the description for terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. Try Huel today for complete nutrition. All right, now that we're done with that, let's get to my conversation with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Oh, by the way, like I told you before, I will be doing a podcast after every practice. So every practice they have, I'll be doing one. It'll be up later in the day. video, audio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my conversation with Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders. All right, Bram. So this was going to be a training camp preview, and it mostly will be. However, we're in DC, and there were a couple of tweets from the president about the name and RFK, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Curious, quickly, your reaction to that.
I'm not surprised, honestly, John. I'm not. A couple of weeks ago, after the Cafe Milano dinner, remember that, where the team
Mhm.
took out some of the members of the council, and obviously, they're hoping to persuade to get a vote faster. And when it came out, a couple of reports that, and it was confirmed, through reporting, that a couple of members of the council, namely the chair, insinuated that if things, don't change soon, that the federal government could weigh in and Donald Trump could
Right.
weigh in. And the second I heard that, I said, for both sides, it's probably better served to move quickly on this because I don't think you want him to weigh in on this. If you're the DC City Council, for a lot of reasons, maybe reputationally, whatever, that he would pressure points that he could push. And in the case of the team, same thing. You don't know what he's going to want if he actually, puts his thumb on the scale. And we saw what his thumb on the scale looks like. And I'm not going to get into any, perspective reasons of why this would come up today. Everyone can make their own assumptions of all of that type of stuff of what would be the motivation to put something like that out today. But I would just say I'm not surprised. And then I'll hear what you and I would just say this I've talked to members in and around the team for the past year plus 2 years now that they've owned it. There is absolutely no momentum within the building to change the name at all. So I'll just leave it there at that. That's what I know about it.
Yeah, and that's like my job in this is as a reporter. So I never, it's funny, you get it, my Lord, Bram, you tweet it and you get accused of all sorts of things by people who have never spoken to you or talked to you in private, whatever. So my job as a reporter, this is what is said, this is what the team says, this is what he says, this is what she says, blah, blah, blah. What I know is, I'm just relaying information. And so people get mad, don't get mad at me. But it's the team, and Josh Harris came out and said they're keeping the name. They like the name. Like you talk to them privately, they say the same stuff. This, and this isn't the same as Dan Snyder put in all caps. Like there became pressure from the minority owners, from sponsors, et cetera. That's why it ultimately changed. So this is not, they don't view this as the same thing, right? But they've been saying this. So if it changes, then you go back to writing the old name. That's
Yeah.
not, I'm not advocating one way or another, never have.
Yeah.
And people who know me probably will know what I think, who know me. Like people listening, you may think you know me, but if you haven't talked to me privately, you don't.
Yeah, one little thing, and then we can move on because I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on
No,
this. I like as I said, like I'm not taking a side either, and
no.
I just know what the team thinks about it, and they're gonna, they want to keep
Right.
the name Commanders, and they want to move on and move forward. But I will say this, just in the climate of the first 6 months of the second term of this presidency, take this very seriously. Like the Stephen Colbert show was just canceled. They can say it's financial reasons, whatever. There have been other payments by media organizations to the president because they've been threatened with lawsuits because they didn't like coverage or whatever it may be. Universities are having funding taken away from them over threats, over woke ideology. Law firms are being forced to pay or give gratis work on their behalf, on the behalf of the organization, because of previous, lawsuits that were intended at the administration. This administration, when they say things like this, actually are serious.
Yep.
And so I don't know how serious this is, and I don't know
You
how
got to pay
serious the
attention.
NFL would take it, right?
Right.
But like I've seen other industries and other things bend a little bit to these types of demands to the point where I do take this very seriously. That's the way I would put it.
Yeah, and again, what I know is what the team says, and if the team changes their opinion, their thoughts, then you put that out there too. I also know the mayor has said that an obstacle to going back to DC before was the name Redskin. So you know all this. If things change, then you report all that, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I do. I'm not sitting here pushing one way or another, just telling you what people think or what they're saying. So yes, I think it will be a topic, and we'll see. The team isn't saying anything. We'll see what the mayor has to say. So anyway,
Yeah.
Brandon, so
Listen,
there you go.
I loved him as the Redskins. I loved him as Washington football team. I love him as the Commanders. I'll be in the booth no matter what they're called. That's the way I look at it.
I wrote Washington
Yeah.
Redskins. I wrote Washington football team. Grew up rooting for the Cleveland Indians, and now I root for the Guardians. I mean,
Yeah.
it's talked about that. So here we go. I did not advocate for
Oh
anything.
yeah, he double whammied you. He
Yeah,
did
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Redskins and
But
Indians.
yeah, but like I said, nobody, people, again, people make assumptions about you. Go check my social media feed going back 13, 14 years. You're not going to see any tweets from me pushing
Yeah.
anything on anybody. So, anyways, there you go. Let's get, because I don't want to go more on that because this is about the season. Like,
Yep.
that's a separate topic. And I think all that stadium stuff will get resolved in due time. Anyway, the season. The other thing is we go into training camp. Now, the big question is Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
But I am curious, like, how you view that one this week and your optimism for getting something done in relative short time.
So in listening to him last week give his presser at the commercial shoot, what I heard was, what I thought I would hear from him, which is more of a position of, guys, I really want to be here. I really want to spend my career here. I really think I've done everything right. And I think I'm a really, really good player. And on all of those accounts, I agree with him entirely. This to me, and I don't, again, I've said this a million times on my show, and I'll say it to you, and I don't know whether you have more information than I do. I don't know what he's asking for. And because I don't know what he's asking for, it's very difficult for me to have an understanding of how this is going to be resolved. But in what I heard from him and what I know from the team side, which is to get something done to have him here for this year, next year, beyond next year, whatever it may be, the course of the bulk of his career, I know that that's a goal of theirs. That's why I think this will get done, and I've always felt like it will get done. I just don't know what the end result is going to be on the contract. And it feels like that this is going to be one of those where both sides are a little bit unhappy, but in the end, let's just all shake hands. I want to call the rest of his career. I want to see his name get put in the Ring of Honor here. And I want to see him, celebrate a Super Bowl championship at the Shoot-A-Vorn, because of all people who have been through here over the last, 25, 30 years, he's one of the players that deserves it more than anybody. So on that account, I hear the heartstrings. I'm glad that he wants to be here. I believe something will get done. I couldn't tell you how soon because, I'll just be honest. I don't know what he's asking for. And that matters to me. This is not a just give him what he wants to make him happy situation to me. He's almost 30 years old. It needs to be taken into account. Length and price point do matter to me. So if I do, not knowing what it is that he wants, that's where I'm sure the hangup is, what his value is, and how long that deal and extension would be.
Right. And I think the big thing too, Bram, now is I'm curious also, at what point do you get concerned about it? Because like right now, we're still a couple days away from training camp opening. If he misses the first week, the first 2 weeks, I don't see that as a big deal for two reasons. One, he's if this were last year and you haven't worked with Jaden Daniels, that's different. But they have a really good relationship. They talk all the time, text, phone, whatever. They've played a season together, and you also know what shape Terry McLaurin is going to be in. So he will handle his business the right way. So I'm not worried about that. If it gets beyond, like if it goes to the end of training camp, now you're looking at something different. And then it's also, is he in or out? Is he holding in or holding out, if that's the case? Because a lot of times it's harder. There's pro and con both ways, but there you see probably this is anecdotal, maybe more incident of injuries of people holding out than if you're in. So, that's the other thing. So at what point do you become concerned for the season with him?
I think if it goes more than a week into training camp, because at that point, I think the positions will have to be publicized a little bit more than maybe what they are. Like even so, we have this press conference on Tuesday with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. Obviously, they're going to be asked. I'll be very interested to see how they address it. And like, one, will they message the same way Terry did, which is we actually do really want you to be here. I'll be very interested to hear how they position that part of it. The reporting, I think it was Jeremy Fowler had already put out, maybe you have the same thing where they don't really want to trade him. And
No, they're
I
not
never
gonna
thought
trade
that I never thought that they did. He wants like the whole thing that leaves me less concerned about, others that are, other contract stalemates that we've covered it in the past, is he wants to be here and they want him to be here.
Right.
Typically, in the end, it works out. And so that's what I think will happen here. It will work out, but I'll be very interested to hear if nothing is finalized over the next, 24, 48 hours, how they position it, the front office, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. Adam Peters more so than Dan Quinn. How does he position it? Because he's going to be asked, and if he's extremely vague about it, I would assume there will be follow-up. So I'll be very interested to see how he positions it. And to answer your question, I don't really get concerned unless it goes more than about a week into training camp, because at that point, that's when you could start having contact. The first few days are really kind of a warm up to everything. And I know who he is and what he's about. So if he misses a few days, he misses a few days. But if it goes more than a week, then you start to get worried. Is he going to miss the whole summer? And what does that mean for the season?
Well, I think that, like I said, for me, if he's in for the second preseason game, I'm good. Because again, you know who he is and what he does and the work that gets put in, et cetera. So, and it's very possible, like if he's holding in, you could have he and Jaden working together after practice just on routes, et cetera.
I'll be less concerned if that happens. If he shows up and is doing the hold in thing, I'm actually a lot less concerned about that.
Right.
Him just being away and angry or taking whatever position, that's when I start to get concerned.
Yeah, and that's fair. And so I think that's the first thing that we need to find out or see if he's reporting, et cetera. Then the other, but I have faith with who he is and what kind of shape will come in. But then can they close this gap? Because I don't think McLaurin's going to go out there and say all this if he doesn't feel like there's too big of a gap. If you're close, you're not going out there saying that. That wasn't to try and get it over the goal line. That was, I think, to try and get it across the 50-yard line or something like that, right? So I think like that's the part where can they close that, and why is there that kind of a gap, whatever that gap is. So that's the hard part there. But again, the good thing for this franchise, for anybody listening, is like if there was a guy that was going to miss time, you want it to be that guy because you know how he's going to handle it. And the hard part too is, and I've talked to agents about this, when you have a guy like Terry is a very passionate, emotional guy. That's where like you have to, it's really hard. Like you can't tell a player not to be that way when that's who he is, especially on the field. Like that's what he adds here. And so that's how he's going to approach this. And if he doesn't feel he's being valued a certain way, whether somebody else can say you're right or wrong, it matters how he feels. So if he doesn't feel that, like, how does that play out? But again, to me, the bottom line is they're both better. They're better together. These guys aren't going to go where they want to go without McLaurin. You're not going to trade him for a draft pick and do anything like that. So, and they've made that clear. And I think his value is always higher here because of what he means to the community, the fan base, et cetera. So it just seems like one where sides get into town, you're talking face to face, and maybe then that's how you get something done.
Yeah. I like when I watched his, press conference, I was very pleased to hear that it wasn't any demands, that were put out there, and any kind of it was kind of like, hopefully this doesn't go to the next step. I want to reiterate, I really want to be here. My life is here. And, so I liked hearing all of that. And my general reaction to it was, this is business. It's not personal. And Terry's a great communicator. You guys have given him the award for being the guy in the locker room that is always very helpful a number of times.
Yeah.
He's an outstanding person, obviously. Everybody knows this about him. And I really do think this will all work out. But I relate to what you're talking about with him. I also can be very emotional about this stuff. And if I feel like I'm being undervalued, I'm really probably not the best person to speak for myself at that point in time. So I would just say that, maybe he needs to step back and let his representation do the rest of the negotiating here to get this done, so that he doesn't feel, he doesn't get insulated a little bit from not feeling whatever the stuff that's coming that he doesn't agree with or feels like is disrespectful to him in any way. I'm very similar that way. Like if I feel like a group that I'm working with isn't showing me, in many different ways how I think they should feel about me, I also get extremely emotional about it. So I would hope that he insulates himself and lets the representatives do the job for him to get this done, so that there are no hard feelings when it's all over. And most of the time, we've done this too long. 99% of the time, when they're done with signing the contract, they may not have gotten everything they want, but it's all smiles and everybody moves forward.
And I think that, usually it's like one side gives this, the other side gives that. You
Yeah.
both sides feel like they gave something and to keep everything happy because you don't want an upset McLaurin in that locker room.
No,
Like he is way too important in there. And I've made this clear too that this group is not going to cave to public pressure, but the importance of him in the locker room. And I think that's where you have to make sure you handle it right. Because now I will say, like, I say, because people are like, oh, the people are watching this, how they handle it. But they've also done a lot of things in the organization to improve things for all these players. So it's not like they're only watching this. This is one of many things that will have transpired for them. But you do have to make sure you end up keeping this guy around and
yeah,
taking care of
100%.
him.
And
So
like
yeah,
again, I just want to reiterate,
too
like,
important.
I don't know what he's asking for.
Right. That's
So
the hard. Right.
if he's literally walking in the room and asking for Jamar Chase's contract, there is
Yeah.
a problem here, and I'll be the first to side with the team to go, you can't do that. So I
Terry's
mean,
too.
like
I think
so
Terry's
I
too
just
soft.
and I'm not saying he is. I just don't know
Right.
what he's asking for. That's
Right.
all.
And I think based on, and there's some idea, but like I think there's also in the talk to be included among a certain group of receivers, right? That's where you feel you belong. And so you see these guys are getting this, and you only offer me that. That's when you could say, but like I will say, the team isn't saying a word.
I
So,
know.
like
Yeah,
that's and I think it's a good way to handle it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So,
agreed.
and yeah, it's I just think eventually it will get done. When, I don't know. Get him in here if it's even if it's a couple weeks, if he's there, I think it'll still be okay because again, how he handles things. So let's go for a few more minutes. What other questions do you have going into camp that like what are like is there one or two things you're going to be watching more intently than others going into camp?
I mean, I really want to see if they're going to give us some hints of how they're going to use Debo Samuel in the season. I'm very interested to see how he fits into this offense, how they're thinking about utilizing him. He's a total wild card in how they can utilize him. And I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury's psyched to have somebody that can move around and be versatile like this in the offense. So I'm very interested to see him specifically, what that looks like. And then defensively, listen, I am the last person to be surprised that they signed someone like Von Miller
Right.
because the whole summer, spring and summer, I'm going, there's just no way they're going to walk into the season without a primary specialist pass rusher who has that skill set that on third down, can make the type of plays that turn games upside down or at least pressure big mistakes or hopefully become a finisher for them in the
Right.
fourth quarter. Unlike what it was a year ago, they just needed somebody like this. So I'm not surprised that it happened because the whole time I was going into camp going, this is going to be a weird amoeba defensive line as they try to figure out how to maneuver people and have packages. Now that he's here, I'll be interested to see how much do they intend to play him? Is he going to be more of a specialist? Is he going to play more downs than I would assume he would play throughout the course of the season? How are they thinking about him? And then the other ones I'm really interested in is corner. Like how quickly is Trey Amos going to move along? Because as far as first impressions go, he was it in the spring. And like, if you told me just after watching him in the spring, and it's not a lot of information, but just after watching it, I looked at that guy and I went, he's a day one starter. They don't need him to be, but I'll be very interested to see how fast he moves along in this defense.
Oh, listen, man, when you're in the three Nick corner sets, he's got to be on the field. Period.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, it's Lattimore, Sandra still, and either Jonathan Jones or him. Like that's
You
what we're
got to
looking
get
at.
him on the field. He's
I I,
really good.
I
So
agree.
yeah,
He
I
feels
don't.
like that to me. He
Yeah,
does.
I would wager enough to think like now he's got to go win it, right? We only saw him this spring. We haven't seen him. Like I want, but part of the reason I want to see McLaurin in their sign because I want to see him against Trey Amos. Like that's who we didn't see him against. Well, I want to watch him cover a guy who was a Pro Bowl receiver last year and do it in practice. How do you match up? Like that's where you start to learn more because he looked really good. Amos did, but I really want. That's why, like, listen, hey, get this deal done so we can watch Terry McLaurin
Yeah.
go up against Trey Amos in practice. I want to see that.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of reason to get it done, but that's also on the board for me. So I think that's it. What are you most excited about to see, I guess?
Um, I mean, like I was talking to a couple of people over the weekend, our last weekend really of having, some time off and away from it. I'm like, this is a different summer for us. I really don't think there's a lot of room on the roster for a lot of like young guys to steal spots. So I think it's a very different type of summer for us. It really is going to be about kind of refining what they're doing. How do they look different on offense and on defense? Obviously, they had hinted back more than hinted. They said it that they were going to use more three linebacker sets. I want to see what that looks like. I do think they're going to be a very different team this year. Like I'm very excited about that too. Like I think they could be more of a team that can lean on the pass more than they did a year ago. That Jaden Daniels' numbers could look very different because of the Tunsil trade and the acquisition of Deebo Samuel. They could be more of a passing team than they were a season ago, but I don't really know. Is their defense significantly better than as they've kind of promised it would be? They've brought in a couple of people that might do that. They've also more than hinted that they're going to be moving some people around in ways that you may be surprised by. So I really feel like more and more and more, this does feel like a very different team, even though at some spots they're really running it back. But I really want to see what that looks like. And so the intrigue for me is what kind of hints are they going to give us? What are they going to show us, which is typically not very much
Right.
in camp, of what they're going to do, both sides of the ball. And if I can get some nuggets of that, that's what I'm kind of excited about because I think the competition part of this is almost practically out the window. If you go up and down the roster and look at the position groups, you'll go, what young guy is beating some of these guys out? Like, I just really
Listen,
don't see a lot of it.
we have to do position battles for ESPN, and like, well, where are they? Is it right guard until Cosme gets back? And like, but they're, and I
But I
guess
can
left,
tell you who those people would probably be. It's not
right,
going to be
like
someone I'm
left.
not thinking
Yeah,
of,
I'm like, is Coleman, can Coleman beat out Allegretti? He's still got to do that. But I think the other thing too, Bram, you talk about a couple things on defense. We only got a couple minutes left, but there are two guys I'm really curious to see their development from last year. One is Jordan McGee because exactly what you said, the three linebacker sets. Now that's going to be when they go to heavy personnel packages on offense. But last year they didn't have that third linebacker who was effective. Now you do. So now you can get a little bit bigger, better against the run against 2 and 3 tight end packages. The other one is Johnny Newton. What does he look like this year? What's the impact of some of the other guys around him, but also the impact of getting a full off season to work out. He showed flashes. He showed flashes in the postseason too. What does it look like for him? Can he provide more of a push inside? So some of those young guys to develop, the McCaffreys, the Sinnets. But I think of that group, I am really curious to see Newton and Jordan McGee.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very interested in seeing them, seeing development there. Sinnott, obviously. They were name checking Luke McCaffrey, so maybe maybe there is some
Mhm.
growth there for him. Let's see. Like what does Jalen Lane bring to them on
Right.
offense, let alone hopefully as a punt returner? There's potentially a lot there. And I'll go back to like I think it was a surprise last year how much they ran the ball early in the season. I don't think it was a surprise that Jaden Daniels ended up being effective because of the athlete he is, but they were a team that rushed for over 200 yards collectively multiple times last year. That was a big surprise coming into the season. I actually feel like this has more of a makings of a more pass forward offense. That what if Jaden Daniels is throwing the ball 5 to 10 more times per game? What does that look like for them? And so I'm very interested to see how that kind of materializes here. Just looking at the personnel packages and the acquisition of Tunsil specifically, that should allow him to not have to vacate the pocket as quickly as he did a year ago because of the trickle down effect of that. And obviously, because he's a all pro tackle, I'm very interested to see, are they more of a pass forward offense than they were a year ago?
Yeah, and I think it's not just Tunsil, but it's like how Connolly handles right tackle early on, and I think this is where Von Miller can be a big help to him in the training camp, because as we've talked before, they're going to face some really good pass rushers early. Now he's got a chance to face a guy that whatever Miller has left, he's a very smart player and can help Connolly's development. So there's that, and then like you said, then you also have Coleman inside. So you have a group that could be pretty strong up there. Does that allow him a little bit more time in the pocket to throw the ball? So I think that will be, and then the key there is first and second down. You've got to be better than they were last year to avoid a lot of those fourth down need plays, right? So I think there's a lot. I think the other part, Bram, is then how do you respond to success? And I don't have
100%.
any I don't have any doubt that this team will handle it well. Then the question is, how do you build on that? What does success look like this year? I think that's going to be
You know,
topic all year.
Yeah, I agree. That's a huge one for me. That's like a number one. I liked what they've said the whole time. I like the way Quinn talks about it. I'll be interested to hear how Peters talks about it because he's been in sustained success places on a number of different occasions before coming here. And I've heard guys like Bobby Wagner talk, Zach Ertz talk, big locker room leaders who've been there, done that, been on teams that have won consistently over a
Right.
period of time. And I think what I hear are, we're ready for this.
Yep.
Now they got to go do it. And this organization wearing these uniforms, whatever their name is, like they haven't done it in a while. So I'm interested to see that too. But I do feel like the offseason felt like they understand that they haven't made it yet. And
Right.
and I really kind of have appreciated that kind of messaging about them
I
this
think
year.
the mindset was very much like that last year. While the outside world was surprised, they were not because of how they handle it, and they expected to win every time. I think they have the same mindset. So I think that bodes well for them. Harder schedule, see how it goes. Anyways, Bram, first practice is Wednesday. Appreciate you coming on. We'll be back. I'll be back, what is it, on Tuesday with hopefully a very special guest that can clear up some things that maybe was in the news. So anyway, there you go, Bram. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back with another episode on Tuesday. We'll talk to you next time.